How to Grow Old, Ancient Wisdom for the Second Part of Life by Marcus Tullius Cicero. Is growing old just a steady decline, or is there more to it? Hi and welcome to the BookLab. I'm Björn and this is the place where we bring you the best book recommendations when it comes to philosophy, psychology, human nature and human potential. And today we're looking at How to Grow Old by Cicero. But first, before we dive into the book, we need some context. Who was Cicero and why should we listen to this guy on the topic of growing old? Cicero was an ancient Roman statesman who lived between 106 BC to 43 BC. He was one of the most prominent figures of Roman histories for several reasons. He was a legendary orator and a master of rhetoric. He was famous for his political career and he was a key figure in Roman politics at the late stage of the Roman Republic. And Cicero was also a prolific philosophical writer. He introduced Greek philosophy to the Roman world and helped shape the intellectual landscape of his time. Cicero was influenced by the philosophical schools of the Stoics and the Academy, and he studied under the philosophers who was there during his time, and these teachers, they represented many different schools of thought. 45 BC was a bad year for Marcus Tullius Cicero. That's how the introduction starts for this book. This year Cicero divorced for the second time. His beloved daughter died earlier that year. The Roman Empire was in turmoil because a few years earlier Julius Caesar had crossed the Rubicon, and Cicero, he was no fan of Caesar. And at the time of writing this book, Cicero had retired to the countryside and he was 63 years at the time. As a style choice for his writing, Cicero puts his thoughts on old age into the mouth of Cato. Cato was supposed to be 84 at the time of writing, and you can actually see him here on the front cover, figure 1, elderly Roman. This is the guy, and the original title of the book actually translates to something like Cato the Elder on Old Age. The discourse in this book is between a fictive version of Cato the Elder and two youngsters that admire this guy because of his graceful way of handling the burden of growing old. In this book, Cicero gives us a positive view on growing old. He admits that old age put limitations on our body, but that doesn't mean that old age is worse than youth. Just like nature has its season, so has life, and even old age is a season that has its own fruits. Ever since the Middle Ages, people have been inspired by this book. The essayist Montaigne, he actually remarked that this book made him look forward to growing old. One of the founding fathers of the USA, John Adams, he admitted that he read this book several times during his later years. Benjamin Franklin, the famous polymath, he was so inspired by this book that he actually translated it, and it's one of the first classical works to be translated and printed in the United States. I want to dip into a few topics that this book covers just to give you a little bit of the taste of what you're in for if you decide to pick up How to Grow Old. A good old age starts in youth. Cicero points out that the values and qualities that you need to have and the character you need to build is something that needs to be cultivated already in youth. Quote, "Miserable young people won't get any happier as they grow older." Moderation and being able to enjoy what life has to offer, clear thinking and wisdom are all lifelong habits that we need to cultivate from an early age, because these are the qualities that will sustain us during our later years. It's not realistic that you will be able to outrun a 20-year-old something person when you yourself are at old age, but old age has plenty of joys for us to enjoy. Cicero, he studied ancient Greek literature and he became a key player when it came to reintroducing the Greek works to Rome. Quote, "There's no greater satisfaction to be had in life than a leisurely old age devoted to knowledge and learning." The book is also quite humorous at times. Cicero, he points out that the old have something that the youth desires. Quote, "What youth longs for, old age has attained. A young person hopes to have a long life, but an old man has already had one." My main takeaway from this book is that old age in itself is not a bad thing. People tend to blame old age on a lot of different things. Quote, "Foolish people blame old age for their own faults and shortcomings." We can all prepare for old age by cultivating a good character, staying curious about the world around us, picking up hobbies and projects. Age is not, in most cases, an obstacle for enjoyment and living a productive life. It is more of a dessert in a way. It's a delicious and natural end to a great meal. There's something soothing about old books that reflect on timeless questions like this one. These are questions that we all ponder, at least me. Questions that people have been thinking about for thousands of years, which reminds me of a quote by Abraham Lincoln. Books serves to show a man that those original thoughts of his aren't very new after all. What is surprising with the advice that we get from Cicero is that it's pretty much in line what the latest science and research tells us about how you can live a good and long life. I recently read this book, which I put a review up on, Outlive, The Science and Art of Longevity. And I think Peter Attia and Cicero would get along quite well. Having great relationships will help you live longer. Moderation in food. I think one of the key takeaways from this book is that one of the most important components for living a long life besides exercise is not to be overnourished or undernourished. Same as the temperance that Cicero talks about. It's a lovely little book, even though Cicero spent a little bit too much on explaining the joys and delight of life on the farm. It gave me a bit of a Walden Thoreau vibe. But that said, this is a book I will read again. I'm super happy I picked it up. It's short, it's sweet. And I actually want to recommend another book from ancient Rome. A book that actually ended up on my great books list. This is a list of all the best books that I've ever read. But before we get into that, I want to say that if you like the content, then press the like button. It makes sure that when I publish a new video, it will show up in your feed. And subscribe if you enjoy book reviews like this one. I put these out every week. The book that I want to recommend is On the Shortness of Life by Seneca. He also talks about the duration of life, but he asks a different question. Is life long or short? His conclusion is that life is long enough if you know how to use it, but most people waste most of it. This is a great book on how not to waste your life. It's kind of a wake-up call because it's both about seizing the day, right? And it also provides a warning about the common pitfalls that people fall into and end up wasting their life. When reading really old books like this, it's kind of hard to keep track of who came first, right? Of all these historical figures. So I keep a timeline actually of all these people that I read about. Benjamin Franklin, when did he live? Montaigne, Seneca, Cicero, and I put out a video of how my system works if you want to create something like that for yourself, if you're also struggling with placing these historical people in the right place in the eons of time. So check out that video right after this. I'm back next week with more book reviews, and until next time, Björn out.